can I welcome you all to the Buddhist Society, and we're on lecture 2, Venerable Professor Dr. Ven Dhammasami from Shan State Buddhist University, and it's a great privilege just for us to host this series of talks on the Abhidhamma. And can I just remind you, all of you from all over the world, if you're not members of the Buddhist Society, please join. It enables us to put on these wonderful talks. I want to make a big welcome to you again, Dhammasami. Thank you so much for coming, putting on these talks. They're really, last talk was absolutely marvelous, and I'm very much looking forward to this talk and subsequent talks. I don't want to take up any time, because time is precious. We've got an hour and a half. We finish at 2 o'clock. So I think without more ado, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Desmond Biddulph, the chairman of the Buddhist Society, for your introduction. Let's start today's discussion by reciting Namo Tassa in homage to the Buddha 3 times together. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Last week I started with the 2 truths, 2 types of truth. Conventional and ultimate. Okay. And that both kinds of truth are equally valid. And the Buddha used both of them in his teaching, depending on the inclination or the capacity of the audience. So that's about 2 kinds of truth. 2 kinds of truth. When we say conventional truth, that's the kind of language and expression, perception that we use every day. Okay, we have venue, we have time, we have people as part of the expression, the description, the thinking process. But when it comes to ultimate reality, we don't have those features of description as in the conventional truth. Instead, we just have description of non-personal experiences like consciousness, the citta, and mental factors, cetasika, which we are going to study today, and physical matter, which is rupa, and the last one is nibbana. Abhidhamma uses the second one, the ultimate truth description. I'd like to emphasize again, this doesn't mean that Abhidhamma is higher than the sutta, as many people would like you to believe. It doesn't mean that only if you know Abhidhamma that you become enlightened. No. The suttas, Sutta Pitaka, or the discourses, the collection of discourses, is equally valid. And the Buddha used them from day one. Actually, Abhidhamma came a little bit late, according to the tradition, on the seventh year after his enlightenment. So the four ultimate reality I like to repeat again. Number one is consciousness. Number two, the factors that arise, that occur, that function together with consciousness. So if consciousness is called citta in Pali, the second one is called cetasika. C-E-T-A-S-I-K-A, cetasika. And the third one, the physical matter, that matters, physical reality. Those three, sometimes we call them mind and matter. Mind and matter. And here, with regard to the mind, we analyze them into two. One is consciousness, the other is the matter factors that arise with consciousness. Yeah, more yeah. So three of them already. But these three, if they talk about the experiences of ordinary people, there is another ultimate reality, that is nirvana or nibbana. That is when the mind and the mental factors, they have been purified. For example, one who has got rid of his or her negative emotion once and for all will never get angry again, will never get upset again. So that state of mind is called nibbana. So nibbana is still talking about the mind, the state of the mind. Well, that's what we what we did last week. And this week, as you already know the title, you can see on the Facebook of the Buddhist Society. I have given a short description for each lecture. And for today's lecture, the title is called Studying the Mind Through Mental Factors. That is to study the mind through cetasika. Because when we talk about the mind, we talk about both the first one and the second one of the four ultimate realities, citta and cetasika. But technically, the first one is what we call consciousness. I mentioned last week that the Buddha made a statement. That statement is that in Pali, babasara midang citta. The mind is naturally luminous, shiny, pure. Okay, the mind is pure, the mind is luminous. But when we get angry, when we have fear, when we get agitated, the mind is not shining anymore. It's not shiny anymore. It's not luminous anymore. It loses its shining at that moment. So why it happened like this? Is it due to a creator? Is it due to something else outside? So this is what Abhidhamma is interested in. So to study Cetasika, we need to study three principles. We can sum them up into two at the end, but let's talk about three. When I say this, I'm referring to Professor Dasa's book. He has summed up from the Sutta and Abhidhamma together. Okay. As some of you have the experience, some people, when they talk about Abhidhamma, they just talk about Abhidhamma alone, okay, without connecting with the sutta. But following the old system that we have in Myanmar, when we study Abhidhamma, we need to be able to relate it to the sutta, the discourses. When we study the sutta, we need to sum it up through Abhidhamma. And this is the training that monastic education or Buddhist study traditionally offers here in Myanmar. What the Buddha said in the sutta is that Anyatara Pacaya Nati Vijnana. Okay, this is Pali, you can forget about it. In Pali, no, in English, it means without condition, there is no mind. Okay. Meaning, without condition, without enough condition, the mind doesn't exist. That we have the mind operating from birth to death is because there are continuous conditions for the mind to arise, to exist. So from this question, from this statement of the Buddha, a question such as is the mind in the heart or is the mind in the brain? Is not relevant. Because you're trying to locate the mind physically. And the mind is not physical. The mind is not physical. The mind is mental. Then how does the mind arise? The mind arises when there are conditions, when there are causes for the mind to arise. With this, we are not talking about one mind. We are talking about a process of the mind. A process. In each process, how many conditions? How many conditions are there? Let me try to simplify this. If you see somebody who is competing with you and that person seems to be doing a lot better at that moment. So when you see that person with your eyes, okay, with your two eyes, when you see that person, let's look at the condition for the mind to arise. What kind of mind would arise at that moment? It can be irritated mind. It can be a jealous mind. It can be a fearful mind. Because you are competitive. It can be an angry mind. No, all sorts of negative mind can arise. Okay, shall we say irritated mind has arisen when you see somebody who is your competitor and who you don't really like. What are the conditions for the irritated mind to arise? Number one is that person, when you see the visual image of that person, okay, in front of you, that physical body, we call that visual object. That visual object is one condition. One condition. The second condition is The second condition is your own eyes. Okay. If you don't open your eyes, or if that person is very far, you're not going to see that person. You're not going to see that person. So your eyes and that person as visual object, they come together, they come into contact. These are the physical part, the physical component, or the physical condition. We can say more like light, because there is light. Okay, that is why you see that person. So these are conditions. What about mental condition? Mental condition is your attention, because you pay attention to the person, your attention. Another one is your perception, because you perceive that person to be your competitor. You see the person as a threat. You see? Perception. Not only perception, we have more. We have more. We have fear. You feel threatened. There is fear in your mind. So fear is another condition. You have fear, you have perception of this person as a threat. And the attention that you pay. We have more, but just to analyze it in a simple manner. So these conditions, physical condition, mental condition, psychological condition, they come together, they produce that irritated mind, that agitated mind, or that jealous mind. With this, I think I have convinced you that the mind doesn't exist alone, or it doesn't exist just like that. Instead, it comes when there are conditions for it to come. If there are no conditions for the irritated mind, then there will be no more irritated mind. Instead of irritated mind, if you don't see that person as a threat anymore, instead, if you empathize with that person, and then you rejoice in his effort, in his success, then instead of jealous mind, there will be a joyful mind that arises. That joyful mind also comes from those conditions. That person as a visual object, your eyes as the receiver, the light. These are the physical condition and the mental condition. Your attention, your perception, and also what we say, joyful feeling. So the first principle is that consciousness arises only with condition. Apart from conditions, there is no arising of consciousness. Can you see the text, or Lavinia, Odin, have you uploaded the page that I mentioned, that I've been discussing, page 73
yeah,
of...
It's on the course, the resources bit on the website, but also Lavinia can share it now on the screen if you'd like.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
But if it's already on the website, that's okay. No need to share. Then the second principle, according to Buddhist psychology, whether you talk about this from the sutta's point of view, whether you talk about it from Abhidhamma's point of view, according to Buddhist psychology, consciousness does not exist as an isolated phenomenon. It doesn't exist alone. As we all know, there's a unique Buddhist analysis of human being, what we say 5 aggregates or 5 constituents. The whole human being, okay, a complete human being can be analyzed into 5. Okay, one is physical factor, and the other 4 are the mind, related to the mental factors. Here in the four ultimate realities, we talk about 2. We make them into 2. That is consciousness and mental factor. But those mental factors, we can also analyze them into 3 in terms of the 5 aggregate. That is why they become 4. My message is not about the analysis into those numbers. My message is that consciousness or the mind does not exist alone. It exists with other things. The mind exists with feeling. For example, feeling is not the mind, but is a factor, is a mental factor. Jealousy, irritation, anger, they are all cetasika. So the mind exists with that. I will return to this when I explain, okay, from the compendium, page 77. I will return to that again. Another basic principle of the mind is that the mind, which is non-physical, always arises with something physical. When I'm thinking, this is because my brain is still working. But my brain is not my mind, is not the mind. The brain is not the mind. The brain is physical. If my brain is dead, that would affect the function of my mind. You see? So this is to say, as Venerable Sariputta sum it up, one of the 2 chief disciples of the Buddha. Okay, he sums up like this. The mind and the matter, they are like 2 sticks leaning on each other in order to stand. If one falls, the other also falls. If physically you are not well, that affects your mind. And if mentally you are so stressed out, that would have some physical effect as well. So with this, I'd like to talk about mental factor, cetasika now. You can see on the website, I have given from Bhikkhu Bodhi's book at page 79. Okay, the whole book is available online. Page 79, that's the list. But before we look at that, let's look at page 77. The characteristics of the mind and the mental factor, or citta and cetasika. What are their characteristics? You have 4 over there. One of them is that they always arise together. Okay, they arise together. When here, I like to explain you about citta and cetasika. Citta, consciousness; cetasika, mental factor. How do we distinguish them? If I say Michael is an angry person, when I use the word Michael, when I use a person, I'm describing this from conventional truth. Then when we analyze this from the point of view of Abhidhamma, it can be Michael, it can be Paul, it can be Robert, it can be Richard, it can be anyone, Harry and Sam, it can be anyone who is angry. It can be anyone. That is why, because it's so universal, the person Michael is not important anymore. What is important is the angry mind. The mind of Michael at that time is angry. His mind is angry. So an angry mind, if we are going to analyze this from the Abhidhamma point of view, there is a pure consciousness. A consciousness that is pure, that is separate from anger. And there is anger. Okay? So anger is what we say, cetasika. That pure consciousness is consciousness, citta. When these two come together, when anger arises with consciousness, that it dominates that consciousness, it colors that consciousness, it changes the character of that consciousness. That is why consciousness becomes consciousness, according to the text, literally speaking, anger-based consciousness. So it can be fear-based consciousness. Fear is cetasika, consciousness is citta. It can be irritation-based consciousness. This is literally speaking. Of course, in day-to-day life, we will say an irritated mind. But that irritated mind, according to Abhidhamma, will have to be analyzed into citta and cetasika, consciousness and the mental factor. Consciousness, which is basically pure. And then that consciousness changes its color when it rises together, when it's accompanied with irritation. So this is citta and cetasika. When irritation subsides, when it ceases, when it's gone, consciousness returns to its normal state. So you cannot call that an angry mind anymore. You cannot call that irritated mind anymore. You see? The reason that we analyze this is to get some insight that these factors of the mind, they come and go. They are changing all the time. And if we know them, we can control them. We can direct them to a more wholesome state of mind. We can develop more wholesome cetasika, positive cetasika. And also, when we talk about an angry Michael, when we talk about that, we can be too personalizing. When we personalize like that, in our mind, we fix Michael as an angry person. Okay. We don't want to allow him to be something else, to be a non-angry person, to be a kind person, to be a patient person, a tolerant person. Why? Because we have a fixed perception of Michael. This fixed perception exists because we don't see that these mental factors, cetasika, they come and go, they're changing all the time. When we see that they're changing all the time, we come to see anger as universal, irritation as universal. When we see that as universal, now we can understand Michael better. He is actually suffering from anger. When he is suffering from anger, he looks like an angry person. But when he is not suffering from anger, he may have other wholesome qualities. So this is the benefit of studying cetasika or mental factors in detail. So citta and cetasika, consciousness and the mental factor, they arise together, they cease together. They also share the same object. If Michael is angry with somebody, maybe with Deborah, and Deborah is the object of his eye, the object of his thought. You see? When we say that, the object of the consciousness of Michael is Deborah. In the same way, the object of his anger is also Deborah, the same object. Then the same base that we are talking about, physical base of the mind. The eye is one physical base, ear is another physical base, nose, tongue, body, and the last one is not physical base. When we say about thought, but we call that heart base. We still have physical base actually. So 6 bases that we talk about in Abhidhamma. Well, with now let's go to page 79. Let's look at cetasika, 52 cetasika. You can see the table, page 79. I'm not going into detail today because we have 2 more lectures on the Cetasikas. What I want to tell you today is that in Theravada Abhidhamma, we study 52 mental factors or Cetasikas. And roughly, I want you to have in your mind that these 52, they can be divided into 3 groups. The first 13 is called ethically variable. Ethically variable, what does it mean? It means it can be good, it can be bad, it can be wholesome, it can be unwholesome. It can also be negative, it can be positive. That's what it means, variable. Okay, ethically variable. You can see over there, the first one is contact. Contact is when Michael sees Deborah as a visual object and Michael's eye, those 2 conditions, they come into contact. They are the physical condition coming into contact. Then we have to have another one, which is consciousness. Consciousness here means awareness, pure awareness. When those three things come together, we call that contact. That's the first cetasika. You see how cetasika is. But when Michael looks at Deborah, if he is happy for her and with her, looking at her, okay, he is happy that Deborah is healthy, is looking fine, is doing well, with no problem. You can see that contact cetasika, okay, contact cetasika is working with wholesome mind, wholesome cetasika, wholesome citta. So you can say that ethically, contact is also wholesome at that moment. But if Michael looks at Deborah and feel threatened because Deborah has a higher position in the office, and she earns more, and she's more popular, she has more authority. As a result, if Michael looks at Deborah negatively, then the contact cetasika, the contact, you remember, contact has its own three constituent. Visual object, that is Deborah, the eye, the looking eye, that is Michael's, and then consciousness. When those three things function as contact, because Michael feels negative towards Deborah, that contact is also negative now, is unwholesome. Okay, in other words, depending on other factors, contact can be positive, it can be negative. Altogether, there are 13 of them. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, up to 13. Okay, I'm not explaining each and every one of them, because you can read Bhikkhu Bodhi, chapter 2. Okay, he has a short explanation for each one of them. And this is just a short lecture for six lectures. So after today, I want you just to scan through the 52. And if you have any question, you ask me next time. So 13, okay. Let's go to the second group, unwholesome. There are 14 of them. Unwholesome. In Pali, we call the akusala cetasika. Unwholesome mental factors. Unwholesome mental factors. Delusion, shamelessness, fearlessness of wrongdoing, restlessness, and so on. You can see greed, wrong view, and all, and so on. Altogether, 14 of them. Actually, next week I will be analyzing these 14. But today is enough just to know that these 14, they are unwholesome. So these unwholesome factors, when they are associated with consciousness, they make consciousness negative. They turn consciousness into negative state. We all know that the Buddha summed all these 14 up into 3. Greed, hatred, and delusion. And how do those three become 14? We discuss next week. Let's go to another category, the beautiful factors. The beautiful factor. We say beautiful because they are wholesome, because they are positive. You have also seen the Buddha sum them up, sum all these 25 up into 3. Into non-greed or generosity, non-hatred or compassion, non-delusion or wisdom. Into 3. And I will be dedicating one talk, okay, to these 25 factors so that we can analyze them more. You can see compassion is here. You can also see appreciative joy is also here. Wisdom is here. Mindfulness is here. It might surprise you why fear is here. Why fear is here? No, there is a positive fear. Positive fear. So, as the first step to study the mind, what we have to do then is, according to what I have discussed today, I'm going to sum it up. The first thing is we need to understand those 3 basic principles. That the mind exists only with condition. And when conditions arise, then there will be mind. The second one is the mind doesn't exist in isolation. It doesn't exist on its own. It exists with other factors. And the last one is the mind and matter, they coexist. Based on those 3 principles, now you can study the mind through these 52 factors. These 52 factors, as you can see, they have ethical implication. When we say studying the mind is psychology, in Buddhism, we say psychology and ethics cannot be separated. In the West, okay, ethics is part of philosophy. Part of philosophy. But here in the Buddhist system, ethics is part of psychology. Of course, ethics can also be part of philosophy. But here, how our psychological state, how our state of mind has an ethical implication. It has an effect on our behavior, on the way we see other people, on the way we relate to the world. So when we talk about unwholesome 14 mental cetasika or 14 mental factors or 14 unwholesome cetasika, we are talking about ethics. We are also talking about a state of mind being unwholesome, being negative. At the same time, we also say these states of mind can be changed into positive Of course, vice versa, a positive state of mind can turn into negative as well. But whether something positive turns into negative, something negative turns into positive, depends on our individual effort, our individual understanding. So we come back to this point. Therefore, Abhidhamma study is about equipping us with self-awareness and social awareness. Self-awareness is awareness of our own state of mind. Social awareness is to be aware of other people when they say something. When they say something negative, when they say something positive. To be able to use the knowledge of cetasika and say, oh, this person is in the state of maybe hatred cetasika, or envy cetasika, worry cetasika, for example. So if we know that, we will be able to control our response. We will be able to influence the situation in a positive way. Okay, I think now is question time. If you have any question, I would be happy to discuss them. Whether your questions are related to last week talk or today discussion. So, any question? Who is reading me the question? Is Lavinia or Odin?
Well, can I just say that thank you very much for your talk. And we
Thank you, Desmond. Thank you.
have one question here, which is an interesting one. I'm sure it's one that puzzles a lot of people. It's not actually completely specific to your talk. And it's from Kay Lilly. And she says, thank you very much for your class today. Is there a larger consciousness outside the mind that we connect to?
Is there a large consciousness out of the mind? Is that the question?
Is there a larger consciousness outside that we connect to?
Well, the Abhidhamma answer is no. You see? Pre-Buddhist in pre-Buddhist India, there was this belief. They call that universal soul or cosmic soul. And the Buddha rejected that.
I suppose some of the factors are where you get limitless consciousness, limitless emptiness or spaciousness, which could be confused with something outside the mind, but it's still inside the mind.
It's still inside the mind. If you analyze 52 factors, you can analyze that empty mind also. Empty mind is a description from one experience. But we don't talk about, in the 52, in the list of 52, you don't have emptiness. So what is it then? That's the question of analyzing. This is the reason we study this.
There is another question here from Leslie Staines. Is not confusion caused by the fact that each moment is a different citta and cetasika, that the arising of hate occurs even a sequence of cittas, over a sequence of cittas?
The arising of hatred, you mean?
By the fact that each moment is a different citta and cetasika, that the arising of hate occurs over a sequence of chittas.
Yes. Yes. One chitta arises, it ceases for the new chitta to arise. So we are talking about a process of chitta. We are not talking about an entity, a permanent entity, a static phenomena. We are not talking about that at all. Yeah.
So another one here, Bhante, please can you explain more about the concept of mind and matter leaning on each other?
When we say matter, I explained last week. And there is no awareness in the matter. So the matter has no capacity to be aware of its own existence. Okay, the matter is not capable of doing that. Then another thing is that because matter is purely physical, it has no ethical implication. When I say, okay, I gave you an example between Michael and Deborah. Michael's two eyes see Deborah, and Michael becomes upset. Maybe Michael might say something to offend Deborah also. But here, okay, Michael's eyes are ethically neutral. We cannot say, okay, Michael upset and his eyes look very red. That is why his eyes they look scary. You can describe whatever you like, but in terms of Abhidhamma, Michael's eyes, the physical eyes, they are neither unwholesome nor wholesome. When he looks at Deborah and smiles because he's happy for Deborah, then his eyes, okay, we cannot say his eyes are wholesome or ethically positive. Meaning, the matter, they have no ethical implication. The ethical implication, the decision part, belongs to the mind. But for Michael to be angry, he needs his eyes, okay? He needs his eye to see Deborah. So his eyes are the matter. And his consciousness, his perception, and the irritation, all those are mind factor, mental factor. So you can see that the mental factor and the physical factor working together. When you have your lunch, maybe it's about time in England that you have your lunch now. When you have your lunch, the food that touches your tongue, the texture and the taste, they all are matter, they all are physical. But the consciousness of the taste, awareness of the taste, the reaction to the taste, that's the mental part. You can see how they work together.
Thank you very much. It was most helpful.
Thank you.
In the higher realm, as human, in jhana, without rupa, how they perceive rupa, or is it irrelevant? So there's conventional true is limited just to mind or citta plus cetasika. I don't quite understand that question. Do you understand it, Bhante?
Now, we haven't discussed the citta. When we discuss consciousness, okay, then this question is more relevant. I want to lead this question to the fifth lecture. To the fifth, when we come to the fifth lecture, please ask this question again.
Yeah. Is there no universal consciousness? How do we explain, for example, miraculous healing of someone who's been designated terminally ill as far as scientific analysis goes, and then presumably is healed?
Why do you think it's a universal consciousness? By the way, I should ask. You think healing comes from outside. But as far as Buddhist psychology is concerned, okay, when we change cetasika from negative cetasika, unwholesome cetasika, to positive one, for example, mindfulness, compassion, joyful feeling, when we have those factors, today scientists also say, when you have joy, when you have compassion, when you have mindfulness, you change the hormone in the physical body. You produce oxytocin. And the oxytocin hormone helps your physical body to heal itself. If you're interested, you can listen to any TED talk, with this title, like "The Brain That Heals Itself." How the brain, when we talk about the brain, we are talking about the whole body. How the body heals itself. Because we develop positive emotion. Mindfulness is a positive cetasika. It's a positive emotion. If we may use the word emotion. Compassion is also a positive cetasika. And also here, appreciative joy. When somebody, maybe somebody is not well, but if he thinks about the good thing in his life, in other people's life, he keeps thinking about good things. This person will recover quicker. The healing will take place. So, in terms of Abhidhamma, we try to understand and analyze healing from the four ultimate point of view, from citta, consciousness, from cetasika factors, and from matter, from physical factors. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that does solve a lot of problems for people. Not a mind, you don't.
Actually, if I may say so, when we talk about universal consciousness, we are talking about something superstitious.
Yes. Yes. And this is from Shoboan monastery. What did the Buddha mean by the unborn, the unconditioned, and the uncreated context?
Yeah. Let me go back to Mike and Deborah. Okay. Mike and Deborah. If Michael understands his negative emotion, and if he does something about that, ultimately, if he change his negative emotion, feeling threatened, fear, if he change that fear into compassion, Deborah has to work hard to feed her family, to be recognized in the society, and to take care of herself in her olden days. And Michael has to do the same. So, this physical body, we have to eat every day. We have to be fed every day. And we have to relate to people every day. That is why Deborah has to work hard. And Michael also has to work. So if he looks at this way, and if he changes his emotion, in scientific terms, they call this hardwiring. Okay, you can hardwire your brain. But here what we are saying is that we can get rid of the unwholesome cetasika and replace them with beautiful cetasika. Once we have done that, when fear never arises again, you can describe that as unborn, because fear never arises again. So the birth of fear is not there. That is why, okay, can we say, okay, unborn, and then when there's no birth of anger, then no birth of fear, there will be no death of fear. So we are talking about each phenomenon. So the Buddha, at the age of 35, when he became enlightened, there was no longer rebirth of anger. I'm talking about psychology. There is no more rebirth of anger. There's no more rebirth of irritation. In our case, okay, like last week for the first lecture, then out of the blue, the Zoom just got interrupted because of the Wi-Fi, because of the computer and that, and we all, got, some of us got irritated. Certainly me, okay. I got a little bit irritated. Irritation was born, and only if I look at that irritation with mindfulness, with appreciation of my assistance, and with every support that we receive, to be able to give this lecture from here in Taunji to the people all over the places, including those in London. With that appreciation, irritation dies. But it dies only temporarily. If the Zoom got interrupted very often, that irritation will come again. So there is rebirth of irritation. When the Buddha talks about something unborn, okay, and undeath, he is talking about this psychological state of mind. It's not very difficult to talk about the physical body not being reborn, not dying. Not very difficult. What is difficult is the changes in the state of mind. So if we look at this, if we talk about the COVID-19 and if we all become stressed out, you can see stress and fear, they are reborn again and again, successively, moment after moment. Okay?
Good, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Very helpful. And there's a question here from Patrick in Oxford. It says, thank you very much for the talk and making clear the place of ethics. And could you speak on that, please? So I suppose it's the thing that you just touched on the combination of the two.
Thank you, Patrick. Actually, I'll be talking more about ethics next week and the week after. Next week, in terms of unwholesome, in terms of negative cetasika. Okay, here ethics. We have to look at the overview of Buddhist thought, Buddhist psychology. The aim of Buddhist psychology, the aim of Buddhist thought The aim of Buddhist practices is only one thing. That is to reduce suffering, to reduce pain. Okay, when we say these 14 cetasikas, they are negative ethically, unwholesome ethically, because they tend to create and multiply suffering. That's the basis of ethics.
That is a very important clarification, because people, in terms of good and bad, and this is a very
yes. Something may be good to you, maybe you think, okay, this is your own business, but what you are doing, if what you are doing has some negative impact on other people, that's unethical. Or maybe you drink a lot of alcohol, for example, and you think you are just minding your own business, and you do that in your own home, and you just spend your own money. But what happened, say in the UK, if somebody got sick, resulting from alcoholic abuse, that person will be at some point admitted to a hospital, and the whole taxpayer and the whole country will have to take care of that person. In that sense, the person's behavior has an impact on the community, directly or indirectly. In that sense, we say, okay, it has ethical implication.
And in consequence, the person, everyone will suffer, or a lot of people will suffer.
Exactly, yeah. Can I have just two more questions?
Yes.
Okay.
This is passed on by Lavinia. As long as we are having consciousness of the matters, or cetasika, happen to us, can we say that we're staying with mindfulness, please? And I'm not quite exactly clear what that means, but I suppose it's as long as we're staying with whatever's in consciousness, or whatever we are aware of.
Let me say like this, okay? Not every consciousness is associated with mindfulness. Is this clear? Okay, not every consciousness has mindfulness. You may be aware of something, okay? If you're angry at somebody, okay, you're aware that you're aware of that person's behavior, that person's irritating behavior, but that's consciousness only. You are conscious of that person's behavior, but that consciousness has no mindfulness quality. If you have mindfulness quality, there will be no irritation.
Yeah. And that's the whole crucial thing about being aware of mindfulness.
So when we use the word in English, like awareness, okay, we have to actually examine the 52 cetasikas. What do we mean by being aware? Being aware of this person being late, this person being inconsiderate. What do we mean by that? If we become aware of a person being inconsiderate and we get irritated, that means, okay, there is consciousness, but there is no mindfulness.
Yes, that's a very important distinction.
Yes. Yeah.
Distinction. There's another question here. This probably has to be your last question. It's
okay.
From Patrick in Oxford. Thinking of Sariputta's two sticks of mind and matter leaning on each other, may non-Buddhist and even Buddhist traditions try to remove certain conditions of negative consciousness by avoidance of a especially matter component, i.e. through practicing austerities. It seems what you are describing is a different, more engaged, more accepting approach where we work on the mind, i.e. removing the anger rather than avoiding the person we perceive as making us angry, of practicing austerities for an idealized state where mind states can't arrive. Can you speak to the implications of that, please?
If you return to the table of 52 mental factors, the last one is called wisdom. The last one is wisdom. Okay. The last one is wisdom. What do we mean by wisdom here? We mean wisdom as understanding things as they are. So if we understand unwholesome cetasika as they are, and we have mindfulness when they arise, we will be able to change. We will be able to change from being negative to being positive. The key factor in transforming the mind, in transforming the emotion, is wisdom, that understanding. So just by following some ascetic rules without tackling the mental constituents, such as these cetasika, without tackling them, Buddhism would say it's not possible to change our mental state completely. We may be able to refrain from something and stop its impact on the mind temporarily, but we wouldn't be able to transform it. So the total transformation comes from wisdom, that is understanding of things as they are. So understanding as things as they are is one of the cetasikas, okay, wholesome cetasika or beautiful cetasika. So if we have irritation, that irritation is what we feel at that time, is the experience. What we need to do is to look at that irritation, to investigate that, so that we understand it. So mindfulness is an instrument for that process, for that transformation process. Yes, it's about acceptance, it's about investigation, it's about working with that irritation, using mindfulness, using compassion, using understanding or wisdom to work with that. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that's a very good point in which we can perhaps leave it until next week.
Okay.
Because I think you, or do you have time for another question?
I think I'd like to stop here because in the morning I had a 2-hour lectures as well, and just before this we have today being full moon day, there was a gathering of sangha, and I had to speak, so I've been speaking too much today.
Yeah. Well, can I thank you very much for a wonderful talk? Because there's plenty to think about and some homework to do as well. Plenty of homework. Thank you so much.
Thank you.